Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dan Nestle Show. I'm your host, Dan Nestle. Many of you out there know that I've spent most of my career in B2B marketing and communications. Now, I kind of fell into it 20-something years ago, and I'm glad I did, because in my biased opinion, and not to take anything away from B2C people out there, B2B is at heart an intellectual pursuit and problem-solving exercise. It's complex. Buying decisions take a lot of time, products and services are often difficult to describe or hard to relate to, and the audiences are much more, smaller, I guess. So succeeding takes discipline, a long view, a willingness to experiment and endure. And maybe most of all, you've got to get your thrills from solving big problems. So B2B is perfect for curious people like me to explore, to experiment and to learn. Also for people like my guest tonight. She's a leading B2B marketing thinker, influencer, practitioner, and sought-after advisor, a self-professed research nerd who's all about helping B2B companies figure out the strategies and tactics that drive revenue for complex products and services. She's the founder of the Marketing Advisory Network, the author of Unleash Possible, a marketing playbook that drives sales. She's the host of Unleash Possible podcast and has recently launched on-demand courses to help you master the art of finding and using buyer insights. Please welcome my fellow Rise community member, my friend, Samantha Stone. Samantha.
I am so glad to be here. And I have to tell you, I don't think I've ever thought of my job as being noble until your introduction. That was a total inspiration. If every marketing student doesn't just run for the B2B community after that, I don't think anything would. That's amazing.
And I'm glad you said that. And noble wasn't the word I used. I will gladly wear that mantle if given me. But I feel like B2B is sort of always shoved aside, and we're always in the kind of dark corners of the room. I work for right now. My day job is with a really huge company that crosses B2B and B2C, and some of the brand team people are from B2C background. I have tremendous respect for them, but they come from a different angle, right? From a different place. And most of it, I think, don't get me wrong, they're highly, their educations are probably better than mine. We're talking about like MBA people with really amazing math skills, which I don't have. But they come from a place of speed and transaction and, real kind of hardcore, looking at the metrics and making decisions fast. Whereas B2B is a little more nuanced, or a lot more nuanced, is kind of my experience. Of course, I'm more on the communication side, so I get accused of being fluffy generally anyway.
I don't know. But, I wouldn't think fluffy is the word that I would use to describe your intellect. But, I think, my experience in the consumer side is smaller. I have much, much more experience like you on the more complex selling side. And I think that the brand teams in those consumer companies have a much harder brand job than we often do, because they have such a broad audience that they have to serve. And that is really, really challenging. But the sales process is by nature simpler. And so we have a different set of challenges, right, than our counterparts who are selling direct to consumer. And it's a really stimulating challenge, I think. It has been for me. It's the space that I spent most of my career, and I'm pretty grateful for it.
Oh, yeah. It can be certainly stimulating. It's why I'm still here, I suppose. But you mentioned that's where you spent most of your career. Let's kind of back up a little bit. And first of all, I want our listeners here to know, and I often kind of talk about these things, but there's a couple of words I'm going to throw out there that people should recognize, which is, one, Mark Schaefer, because Mark is the kind of Uber connector, marketing thinker, convener of all things good in marketing. I think that has facilitated our friendship, Samantha, right? Through a great event that we went to called the Uprising. Some of our listeners will know I've spoken to a few other Uprising folks by this point. So, the conference to end all conferences, maybe, 30 people. It's fantastic.
I love in a physical in-person event because it was intimate with shared interests. And we got to spend a tremendous amount of time talking and learning from each other. And Mark does an absolutely just remarkable job at bringing together people that are different and have different backgrounds and different worlds they live in, but have sort of a shared goal and vision for where we go to and the ability. And I have met, yourself included, some amazing, wonderful talent that I don't think I would have met in any other way. And I'm so grateful to Mark for helping bring that community together. It's been a joy. I've been really feel very fortunate. I had a chance to go to that first Uprising and back since.
Yeah, and I went to the second or third one, whatever there was, because I know there's a few COVID years intervening that stuff didn't happen. There was online things that I did, but I was so excited to be there last year. I'm excited to go again in the near future, and I think I'm going to go this year. But I'm just I feel like I should echo everything you just said, and more than that for me. Coming out of corporate background and having been outside the US for a long time, you run in sort of these, I don't know what the word is, these really kind of intimate circles of marketing leaders that have met and known each other through years and years of conferences and speaker engagements. I kind of like if I'm a fanboy of the genre, right? So you're in that circle of people. I'm like, oh, let me go. If you were a movie star, I'd be running to get your autograph, that kind of thing.
I know your audience can't see that, but
yeah, but I mean, but the great thing about the Uprising, it was also, counterintuitively a leveling in my mind, because we all had a right to be there. We all had it's a really great way to get over imposter syndrome, which I carry with me like a monkey on my back all the time, and being there, exposed to you and to all the amazing thinkers and the authors, people have actually written books, which is something I seriously admire, and my listeners know that. It's a privilege for me and a professional kind of highlight, but also a revelation that, wait a second, we're all people. We're all very similar in so many ways. And I haven't been out on that stage, but
I think it's so good. Talent that Mark has and that's part of what's in all of his work, right? If you read his books, is this humanness, and he attracts people who like people, who want to be there. Now, my dirty little secrets, I wouldn't call it imposter syndrome, because I, at this point in my career, feel pretty confident in that. But I'm a terrible, go mingle in a crowd kind of thing. I don't enjoy that. When people meet me, they don't believe me, because I've built a career around sort of a facade of making myself have a job in places. So I love to host. I'm an incredible host. You give me a job in any size room, in any size stage, and anywhere, I'm going to go and I'm going to have the time of my life and I'm going to love it. But, walking into a conference, reception of 300 people and just sort of mingling, it's like every nightmare I ever had. I don't love it. So for me, the Uprising is the complete opposite of that, where everyone is just together and talking and learning from each other, and all the humanness that I crave, and all the intellectual ideas and laughing and just getting to know each other is exactly what that's about. So I'm really, really grateful for it. And I suspect if you asked everybody who came, they all have something about that experience that tapped into some sort of really human need they needed, as well as their sort of intellectual desire to learn something.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was surprising to me. I didn't know what to expect. I mean, I'd known a little bit for some of the people who'd been there and chance meetings here and there, but I wasn't sure. I was so pleased and so kind of energized by the end of it, but also realized that the learning was part of it. The connections that we made were a huge part of it, but also just the idea that marketing, communications, whatever it is that we do, creativity, being curious, intellectual curiosity, they're all so common across leaders in the field, but they need a valve. They need like an escape valve, something that we're able to just be in a safe space for a couple of days and just like let the ideas fly. With some criticism maybe here and there. People are fairly honest during these 3 days, which then kind of bridged over to real, true human emotion, which was a surprise. That was the surprising part to me. Where we're talking about marketing stuff, and then somehow, somewhere along the way, there's a box of tissues making its way around the circle. And, I've never been involved in something like that.
It's a really, it is, it's funny you should say that. It's an emotional experience. And I think we as marketers who market to companies, right? We sell to buying committees. We forget, it's too easy to forget that good marketing, great education is emotional. It taps into something in you. And you're right. The Uprising does an incredible job of living that ideal and bringing it to surface and bonding. And I don't stay in touch with every single person as closely as others. There's definitely more. But I feel very friendly with everybody that I met there. And I feel, really connected to them in ways that there's some great events I go to that have 500 people to go to them. Nothing wrong with that. They serve a purpose, but it's a really different purpose than the kind of thing that we've been talking about.
Yeah. And then the Rise community, which sort of was an outgrowth of that. And they're different people. There's some uprising people on Rise. And I find, of course, I'm certainly in touch with you. And because of that, I think that's been a really good, a good facilitator for our relationships to grow in that way. But it's also helped us look in different directions and really double down on the learning, and meet a whole lot of new people. So, I'm grateful to that as well. And again, that's
street cred with my adult children. I had
Oh, really? Because Discord?
The Rise community up. And my 21-year-old walked by and did a double take and said, "Mom, that's Discord." He said, "Is that a mistake? Did you look?" And I said, "It's not a mistake. I'm part of a community." And then I, was explaining what we were doing and also, belonging to sort of an AI image generator that was there as well. And it was a really funny thing. But honestly, it has taken me outside my comfort zone and sort of, I hadn't been on Discord before. I'd done it once or twice before. I really didn't like it. And there's something magical about this community is very engaged and very helpful. And in a short period of time, checking Discord is now part of my daily routine, like checking LinkedIn is. It's just as I do it just as often as I do that. And that's where it's shocking to me to have a new tool when I'm at the point in my life and career where I want to kind of like take things away, right? And
there's always something new. And full disclosure, because you are active on the Discord that I'm active on, I don't do a lot of research on people for my show. I've said this before, I barely any. But because you've been active in the Discord, I just went back and I looked through a lot of your old messages for the last several months, just to get a couple of things that maybe I want to touch on while we're talking. And I will, if it gets that way. And that's one of the reasons why I called you a research nerd at the opening, because that's what you said in the Discord. So I feel like I've gotten to know you better through that. And by the way, my daughter said the same thing. She saw it open on my PC. She's like, "What is that? Get out of there." Like, wait, I'm going to it's what we use for community. She's like, "Old people are using Discord too." She's 16.
We have to find something new, right? It's a whole new.
God, yeah. Yeah, it's ridiculous. So it is endless and it keeps going. But you mentioned the curiosity and just like it's part of your day, and you're learning new things and out of your comfort zone, right? It just makes me think about how you got to where you are now, and because your comfort zone wasn't originally in marketing, that's not where you started out. That's not where you started, and so like as long as you'd like to take, how did you get to be the influencer, the author, the thinker that you are today, and get so like passionate about B2B marketing strategy, all that good stuff that we're talking about?
Yeah. It's really fascinating to me to look back at, because I did not take a single marketing class in my entire college career. Never in a million years would I see myself as a marketer. I went to college I have a degree in economics. And I thought I was going to do public policy research. And then I did an internship at a government organization. I thought, oh no, I have made a terrible miscalculation. I am not patient enough to do public policy research. I couldn't find a more mismatched goal in life for what it's. I love the idea of policy. I love the idea of the challenges. I love the idea of having big impact, but I'm not patient enough. Public policy, for good reason, by the way, takes years to do, right? Because you're affecting whole communities of people. And somewhere along the way of my learning this, I hadn't thought about it. So I graduated college and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I called up my dad, who at the time was living in East Africa, and said, okay, Dad, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, so I'm going to go get my master's because, that's what we're going to do, right?
Because that's what we do.
I don't know what I'm going to do. And my dad said, that's amazing, honey. That's great. And how are you going to pay for that? And I was like, oh, you're going to pay for it, aren't you, Daddy? Daddy laughed so hard. I think, my apartment shook at that moment. Like, I just paid 4 years of this tremendously expensive college. You're debt free. Like, I came out of college. I'm one of the fortunate ones without a single penny of debt. I had a car, I was just really, really fortunate and really, really lucky. And I had no idea how lucky I was. So after Dad stopped laughing and we talked for a little while, I was like, okay, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I got a job temping at a temp agency just to be like, okay, till I figure out what I got to do, I actually have to make a little bit of money. And so the very first temp job that I got was at a company at the time called powerhouse. And it was this massively fast growing technology company. I mean, honestly, so fast growing, was literally sitting in the hallway outside my boss's office because we'd run out of space. They were building a building, but we couldn't move in yet. Right. So just this massive tech, being a tech company, being, none of this made any sense to me. I would never have envisioned it. But I started there and I was in the channel sales group. And I fell in love with the swiftness of it. I got really, I won't go into tremendous detail, but I was super fortunate in that for some reason, the people who hired me offered me a full-time job. They offered to pay for my master's, which I didn't end up finishing because it was public administration, which I didn't really want to do anymore. Yeah. But they gave me responsibilities that no one in my situation should have ever had. I got really lucky. They believed in me in ways that I hadn't earned. And I did channel sales at high-tech companies for a number of years. And along the way, I started doing some of my own marketing because most of the marketing team was for the direct sales force. So I started doing some of my own things and I started complaining and I started being me. And I'd like to believe I was constructive enough that, but also whiny enough, probably, if I'm being honest. There was a combination of both, but I was performing enough on the sales side that they sort of listened to me. And at one point, somebody said, you know what, Samantha, you can do this better. Here, take this product launch. You own it. Make it happen. And that was my first foray into marketing. And what I learned was two really important things. I absolutely loved marketing. And the thing that drew me to is I was a successful salesperson. I was making good money. I was good at my job, but I could affect even through partners, just my partners, just my accounts, that's in marketing, I could affect all of it, the entire territory, right? Everything. And I loved that. The other thing I learned is it was really hard, way, 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 way harder than I thought it was going to be. And so I tell you all of that story because I think my path to marketing, and by the way, since then I've taken marketing leadership classes. I figured I should learn some of the formalities of things and use the right language and did all of those things. But my path there, I think, is what makes me a good marketer. Because I have this background in data analysis. My economics degree, I learned to do a lot of analysis. And because I was sort of going to pursue public policy, it was all about these big ideas and community things. So that data skills were there. And then the next thing I did was sales. And so I had this very customer-centric point of view, very sensitive to the sales team, understanding the point of having a number you have to hit, understanding how to find my audiences. I didn't know to call them personas and things, but I was doing it. Mm-hmm. And then I came to marketing and I had no idea how to do marketing because I didn't take a single marketing class. So I just did the things that worked. And I was ignorant enough maybe of the consequences of just doing my own thing that I just learned as I went. And the combination of those things, I think, have always made me a good marketer because I didn't know what I was supposed to do. And so I could do it. Now today, so I did that for a lot of years. And then 10 years ago, I decided I loved the core work that I did. I loved marketing, positioning, strategy. But the more senior I became in organizations, the further from the work I became and the more I was surrounded by internal politics. And I was traveling a lot for internal meetings. And that was fine, but I wasn't loving it. My kids were getting older. And I said, I want to do what I do, but without the baggage of the political clouds that sit on you in those organizations. And bless the people who love and cherish that because we need them. I'm not one of them. I was not good at it. I didn't like it. And so I started the Marketing Advisory Network so I could do the things that I loved, but to do it for a number of companies and do it very without that internal stuff hanging over me. And then subsequently wrote the book because a lot of people would come to me and couldn't afford me. And I didn't want to give my services away for free. I'm a primary financial support for my family. And I have 4 now adult children, but didn't at the time. And so I wrote the book as a way to help people that learn how to do the things that I did, who maybe couldn't afford someone like me to come in and do the work for them. And it had its own reward. So that was a very long answer to your question, but
no, it's great.
Some context for how I think about the world.
Yeah. Now, in the middle of all that, you're talking about data. You're talking about, how you that background in economics. It's not too surprising, right? That you'd have if you come out of college with a sort of data-driven background, even though you were looking at policy, the skill set was still kind of analytical, right? And then you find yourself, wait a second, I'm actually really good at talking to people and understanding people. Maybe there's just a smidge of empathy, like knowing you. But you have that natural people skill. So data, people, and then wanting to be.
I have that people skill because I am deathly shy. No one, again, believe it. Like I literally as a child would hide in closets and not talk to people. My mother had to come to pre-K with me because I couldn't be alone in the room. And I'm so aware of my nervousness and discomfort in places that I am extremely empathetic to watching people and seeing I'm very good at reading their body language, virtually or in person, to try. And I'm desperate to make them comfortable because I'm desperate for the world to make me comfortable. It's a hard thing to admit, but I think that is ultimately where it came from. And then I had this sales job that honed the skill in the context of a business environment.
Yeah, you got put in the crucible in some ways, right? That formed you, and where you could. Some people don't really understand this, especially some younger professionals that I know here and there. That just because you don't have the skill doesn't mean you can't get the skill. Correct. Like there are some fundamentals that may give you an advantage, but anybody could learn what to do and be a better people person. You won't necessarily be great at it. You may not necessarily be a great salesperson out of that whole thing. But you can learn coping mechanisms, to just deal with whether it's, being very introverted or being over extroverted, like I tend to be, you find these middle grounds. But the point is, right, that it helps to have, I don't know, a formal structure or guidelines around your incentives to make that, to form that into something that's going to be a powerful tool for you. So you did that with, and became a good salesperson, channel sales. And this is all B2B stuff, right? I mean, it's all,
yes,
long cycle sales,
multiple decisions, right? Yeah. It's a single person, a bunch of people.
In some ways, I always felt, so there's some similarities in my background as well. I mean, I went to school for international relations and poli-sci, and I didn't know what to do with that. And, I know that we were coming up around the same time. And then I went to Japan and I was teaching for a little while, and then I didn't know what to do. And I also got into sales, and I never wanted to be in sales. Like I never dreamed of a million years of being in sales, but it was different as recruitment. So, generally speaking, B2B, but with a little bit of a weird twist to it because your products are people. And that comes with its own set of interesting, I guess, consequences. But I did that for a little while, but not that long, until I started to kind of think that I didn't want to be in front of people trying to close a deal. That didn't make me comfortable. But on the other hand, kind of understanding how I could convince or persuade audiences out there to want to talk to me or my company in the first place. Like, how could I make the job of the salesperson easier? Whenever I went out there and I'd be at a client meeting as a salesperson and you're just like, okay, I need to close this. And of course I was young in my 20s. Like I wasn't in any position to, I mean, maybe I was, but I I was okay at closing some things, but I was terrible with rejection, and it just really bothered me a lot. So I figured, how can I make that easier for other people? And eventually, I think that's where marketing certainly appealed to me, because it's understanding what the salespeople are going through and trying to make their life better and easier, which in turn makes your life a lot better and easier, and it's a big cumulative effect. But I eventually also found myself in the B2B space too. Like, I just found it to be, because I didn't love that transactional sale. I felt that you needed to spend a lot more time B2B, sort of, convincing and persuading and building stories and building a reputation, building all these other things to get your customer to accept you, but also to get audiences to know you. It's just a bigger process, and which would remove me further and further away from the transaction and put me in, ironically, a safer place, even though I wasn't putting up the same results. I don't know if I'm sure that makes sense to you, but
it definitely makes sense. And one of the things that the last 5 years in particular is we talk about B2B and B2C, and for good reason, it makes sense. But really, it's really about complex sales versus simple sales. Because I may sell a simple thing to a business, right? Or I may sell a complex thing to an individual person. And or a family. And so because I've had an opportunity to dabble a little bit in more of the consumer things through my clients the last few years, it's been really helpful for me to see where those things overlap and where there are differences there. But it's been a fun exercise to learn from each other, right? There's things that consumer brands can learn from people who sell to businesses, and there's things that businesses, we've certainly seen lots of learnings that we have, taking cues from consumer businesses and integrating those things into our own ways of going to market.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's take a look at that a little bit further, like into the B2B world, and into this whole idea of how companies, can figure out where they're missing the boat, right? And what they can learn from B2C companies and vice versa. Really, basically the meat of what you do. And your business or your website and your book called Unleash Possible. I mean, I don't think there's anybody out there, certainly any small, medium company, but even large companies, who have fully tapped what's available inside their organization to get to the results that they need to get to, whether you're talking about people, whether you're talking about processes, whether you're talking about, their sales and marketing process as well. So you're unleashing the possible. That's my interpretation of what you're trying to say there. What got you into this? And, what do you see as like the main things that, that your companies, your clients, your targets are kind of looking for? And what do they need to do first? Like, what's the big possible that they need to unleash?
Yeah, there's a whole lot, right? But there's a couple things that are thematically I see sort of all the time. And one of the things that I see all the time is that we run our businesses, and in the process of creating our businesses, whether it's a product, a service, a big company, a small company, no matter who you sell to, we spend a fair amount of time trying to convince the world that we have this big opportunity. That's how we get loans. That's how we get VC money. It's how we get investors. It's how we get just mind share resources, how we recruit employees to join us. It's, so we spend all this time talking about how big an opportunity it is. The problem is that almost always fails to create traction. What we really need to do is find niches that we can own and expand from. And so what we really need to do is hone in. So consistently, I find that we are afraid to narrow our audience in the way that is healthy to narrow our audience. And so that is a really important exercise that we all need to go through to really understand who we can best serve. Because here's the thing. If we can have lots of customers, but if they don't come back again because we're not a great fit for them, if they don't advocate for us, the cost of acquisition for new customers goes up, right? There's all kinds of consequences of bringing in customers who aren't a great fit for us. It's expensive. It's not durable. It doesn't create predictable revenue streams. We can't sustain our growth that way. And so if we can spend time to be focused, we're going to be much better off. So that's definitely one of them. The second thing is boards, CEOs, salespeople are obsessed with measuring marketing by marketing generated leads. It's an obsession that we have. And I have been part of that obsession. I take blame. I'm sorry, right? Like all the things that I've done wrong here, just like everybody else. It is the absolute fundamental wrong thing to do because it creates the wrong behavior. When we do that, marketing has to be focused only on certain kinds of lead generation. We focus on the wrong things. We don't it creates all kinds of, we could do a whole episode of this, so I won't go down there. But we too often measure marketing incorrectly when we should be measuring and holding marketing accountable to sort of the overall business metrics and growth that we have. And that doesn't mean marketing internally to marketing shouldn't be looking at optimizing things and shouldn't be looking at things like lead numbers. Of course we should. We have, but It's not what you hold marketing accountable to as a function. And I'll give you an example of that. One of my very first consulting client as part of Marketing Advisory Network, as part of my company, I'd done some consulting on the side for many years, hired me explicitly to double the number of leads coming into the organization. That is why they hired me. And I went in and I did what I did is I talked to customers, I talked to non-customers, I sat with the sales team, we did all this analysis, we looked at all the leads that were coming in. I built my plan and I sat down with the CEO and the head of revenue who had hired me. At the time, they didn't have a VP of marketing. They had people in marketing, but not an executive. They were on a search for an executive. And I was sort of a temporary measure. We sat down and I said, I have amazing news for you. And they're like, oh, we're so, they're jazzed, they're excited. And I said, we are going to cut leads in half. And I got the reaction that you would expect that I got, like, there was like this desire, but in fairness to them, I give them tremendous credit because they took a beat and they let me explain. And what I explained and sat down, and I said, look, we've been creating, the reason you think you need twice as many leads is because 80% of what you're bringing in is ineffective. It's not actually ready for a sales engagement and opportunity. And so we went, through all the things and we made the changes that we needed to make. And we better understood the buyers and we honed in our marketing messaging and we tightened our campaigns and we did a whole bunch of other things. And at the end of the day, within 6 months, we brought in half as many leads at the same budget without increases, and we grew revenue 25%. And the reason we did that is because we were understanding our audience and we were holding marketing accountable to measuring the length of the sales process and revenue and pipeline contribution instead of leads anymore. Because I can always get more leads. I can buy a list and call them leads. That doesn't do me anything, right? And so that's when I talk about measurement, that is the third thing that people do far too often is we try and spend our way into success and growth. And we think about it in terms of running more ads, more content syndication. Look, those channels are good and healthy. And for some things, they're really valuable. I don't dismiss their value. But fundamentally, we try and artificially grow, and you're going to hit it. We don't tap into referral activity. We don't tap into advocacy. We don't tap into word of mouth and in our B2B complex selling world enough. And it's a huge, huge missed opportunity. And most of the time, if we can break that and start piloting and experimenting there, pretty remarkable things can happen. And those are sort of three things that I pretty consistently see in most organizations.
Well, and they're tied. They're very, very much tied together. Without that part two, which is that the reliance or the kind of expectation of numbers of leads, of marketing qualified leads, and I've been there. The incentive to spend money to get those leads wouldn't be there, right? So if it's all about focusing in on the quality rather than the quantity. And you're looking at quality leads, you're looking at however you're scoring those leads. And, I'm telegraphing a little bit because I know that's all in the book. But anybody who, by the way, is interested in really getting some details about how you want to do this, Samantha lays it out very nicely in Unleash Possible, the book, with some incredible how-to guides and case studies. Very easy to understand. Shame on me for not reading the whole thing before we met today. But I've seen enough, and I've certainly known Samantha enough that, this is the kind of thing that just kind of it would be incredibly useful to any marketer. But the point is, right, that if you could tweak that second part, right, the the expectations of what the marketing team needs to deliver, then the third part changes, right? So it's all kind of connected. I suppose the first one too, like, so like going back to your first point is of narrowing the audience and finding a niche or whatever, whichever, I always have a problem with that word. That's, people have a lot of trouble with this. I was just chatting with Evelyn Starr, right, recently. Another one of
another upriser.
Another upriser. And, we did I read her book, Teenage Waste Brand. And finding a niche is so critical to long-term success. And, I think founders and, boards or, even salespeople, some people just decide that, oh, you know what? I saw an article about such and such, and this is where we really, really need to make our niche, or we've developed this widget, and the population has shifted. So how we're going to niche down is we're going to create a smaller version of the widget, or a widget for younger people, for older people, whatever. No, it's not quite right. I mean, it could be, but it's guesswork, right? Whereas what you're advocating, and you sort of glanced over it a little bit when you said you talked to customers and non-customers and you built a plan, that talking part of it is so incredibly important. That qualitative research that I think so many people overlook to do what? To define that audience and to figure out what that audience really wants. So
yes.
What's your typical process around that? Or like, how do you go about, figuring out who the buyers are and what the audience is and what should people think about? Like drilling down is that very first point about knowing the audience.
Yeah, it's really critical because qualitative research is actually a little bit of a lost art. I actually think consumer marketing tends to have done historically a better job of that. We on the business complex sales side have a lot of tremendous amount of data. And so you start with data, right? Data starts to tell you, where am I making money? Where are we losing deals? Where do we have the most resonance? Where does our database, like it tells us a whole bunch of things to do. The data tells us what? It tells us sort of like what has happened and what has happened at a point in time or over time and trending. It doesn't tell me why. And so the qualitative research has to complement that, because the qualitative research helps me understand why a buyer or a group of buyers takes a certain likes a certain aspect of our product or service, or the process that they go to buy. And there is something I learn more in 5 qualitative research interviews than I learn looking at spreadsheets. And I love spreadsheets. Look, I really do. Like, my husband laughs at me because I'll be in bed at 2 a.m. looking at a spreadsheet. I truly love data. It's sort of an unhealthy relationship I have with it. But it just points me to where I want to learn more. And now that I know I want to learn more over here, I get to dig down and talk to real people and understand that, because they're making not just rational, but emotional decisions about what they're doing, and they're making connections. And so when you get to that point that you can have those, real conversations where I'm not trying to sell somebody, it's not sitting in a sales, in a sales call, but that's not a research call. On a research call, I'm not trying to sell anybody anything. I need to be objective. I'm not leading, them down a specific path. I'm looking for feedback. And those research calls can be just sort of open-ended, understanding how they do their job. It could be I'm showing them a product and I want feedback. It could be a message testing where I'm actually putting specific messaging in front of someone and asking for a series of feedback. And then once you have that, you sort of combine, hey, this is what the data told us. This is what the qualitative research told us. Now we can go build out a campaign and a content plan to map against what we do truly understand about our buyers and what they care about and why they care. And one of the things that often surfaces in this research that's really hard for product teams in particular to understand is human beings, it is natural for us to put the most value on the product or service that is the hardest for us to deliver, right? For whatever reason, it is the hardest thing for us to do. So therefore, it is the most expensive. We think it's the most value to our audience. But sometimes that is not true. And in fact, more often than we probably realize, we may have 12 features in a software product that's out there. Yeah. The thing that was hardest to build may be of least logical value to the person that we actually sell to. So when I'm promoting the features and trying to get somebody's attention, I want to promote the thing that was most important and most unique to our buying community, even if it was maybe the easiest thing for me to build, right? Because that's what buyers care about. And that's the work we have to do in that qualitative exercise, is to ferret out those nuances and things so that we can prioritize our message. Because when you sell a complex product or service, there is a lot of message. There are a lot of things that we do. It is hard. It isn't a simple impulsive purchase. There's lots of people who have lots of different angles. And we need to understand what is important to each of those people at each stage of that process.
Wait, it's not as easy as like doing a LinkedIn ad targeting the purchasing department and making that.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Why can't we do that?
Yeah, if I could crack that code, that would be a lot less work on my part. Yeah,
that's so 2017. I'm sorry.
It is really, really, really hard. And the other thing that I will tell you that I think is new, Dan, is salespeople in these complex sales environments are going through a big probably even a bigger transformation than in marketing. And there's a lot of confusion about what the role of the salesperson is in today's buying process and how we do things. And one of the things that I think is a missed opportunity, and I hope to see more shift in this direction, is salespeople are our best personalization engines. They have the ability to study someone, to get to know someone, to do iterative things with individuals that marketing cannot, right? We can put some smart assumptions into a system and say, hey, they were on this web page and they visited this paragraph, so the next thing I want to offer them is this, or they're from this company, so we think this is going to be most important to them. So marketing can do some smart things, but it can't be, human personalization, and our sales teams can. And that's where we should have them spending their time, right? Is really doing the thing that our systems can't do, and building those emotional connections, and then building the rational case. Look, buyers decide what they want to buy, and then they build an ROI or a rationalization to justify the decision that they made so they can go get the budget. And our salespeople should be the group that makes that emotional connection. Our brand should support that, right? Our marketing should support that. But to really close in on that, it's looking somebody, in the eye. And we all have that coffee shop we go back to, not because the coffee is that much better, but it tastes better because the person gives it to you with a smile and we like them, right? It's the same thing in our world.
Do you think that experienced salespeople or like successful salespeople already do a lot of that, and they kind of know instinctively, or they know from experience the exact, like they have the buyer persona or the buyer data sort of in their brain. They just haven't shared it out, right? And they want to, because they're selling.
Yes.
So what's the mechanism for them to share it back into the organization or with their teammates? And do they have the incentive to take time away from selling to do that?
So I think that's a really good question. And every salesperson in sales will tell you they don't have the time, but they do have the time because we're wildly inefficient today. If marketing had some of that knowledge that salesperson has on their notebook or in their head or in a notes field that I can't extract and do anything with, right? We could actually be more efficient in our campaigns and our marketing to help their job get not easier. Easier is the wrong word, but to take some of the administrative things off, to cue things up in a different way for them. So I do think that the people who are really, really good at sales, what they do is they qualify a person and an opportunity really, really fast and really well. And they know, should I be spending time on this? Yes or no? And if yes, in what ways? They're doing this, and it's either a natural skill, or they've been well trained, or they have a really good sales methodology in the company that's sort of steeped, or they have a great manager who helps guide them through this. But that's I was a good salesperson because I didn't waste my time trying to convince somebody who didn't need my product to buy my product, because I maybe once in a while I'll charm them into buying something that they don't really need, but that's not a sustainable model for us, right? And then I get a customer who'll never renew because they liked me and they felt bad and they bought it, but they used like 1% of what I offered, and they'll never be able to renew that again for me. So really good salespeople don't do that. They really understand, what does my buyer need? And can we serve that? And if we can serve that, then I start to make that connection.
Yeah. I'm just thinking back to when I was in sales, and then when I crossed over into marketing and PR. And I was in the recruitment industry as a salesperson. Then I was in the recruitment industry as a marketer. And so I was marketing recruitment services for a big company in Asia. And it was right at the time that the new rules of marketing PR came out. So I know you've had David on your show.
David, he's awesome.
He's like in the stratosphere, in a lot of ways. But anyway, back then, 2007-ish was when the book came out, and my team gobbled it up. My boss was like, "You guys need to read this book," and we really focused in on it, and the whole idea of buyer personas really started to jump out. So how do we create buyer personas for recruitment, right? And we started to drill down into this. Now, the recruiters, we're all good friends. We're all out there having a couple beers after work. We're all doing this thing, whatever we're doing. And they don't want to give us information because it's just taking time away from their phone calls. What they want to do is say, we need 50 brochures, right?
We need some. I've seen that, and collateral brochure is never the answer to any actual question.
Oh yeah. We need leave behinds. That's what we need. More leave behinds. And this is sort of also, we're talking early days of when web commerce really started to pick up, when the web moved away from brochure websites into interactive destinations, and to be on the cusp of that was really exciting and interesting. We tried to play around with that a little bit even back then, but it's really like that kind of, the salespeople had this, I don't want to call it a mystique, but or I don't know what to call it, but they had this will to keep separate from the marketing and PR people, because they're like, no, we're out making the money. You're here spending the money. You do what we want you to do, and help me make more sales, and then we'll be nice to you, marketing people. It's kind of the way it felt. And we were always felt inferior to them, for a long time.
I think that's a really common situation, right? Where sales is your customer, not the customer. And we have to change that. And that's an unfortunate, and we have to earn the respect of the salesperson and earn their trust. And the way we do that, part of the reason that salespeople are like bouncers, I picture them. You can't talk to my customer without my permission, right? Part of the reason that happens is because marketing and other people across the organization ask for data from salespeople and then never do anything with it. So I'd be annoyed too. I'm not filling out 16 extra fields for you to do nothing with that data. That's a waste of everybody's time. So the way I get around that, and a lot of times, is to create pilots. So I find one or two salespeople or a territory that are willing to experiment with me. We work really hand in hand. We show and prove that we use the information that they're giving us, and we prove it out. And then you have earned the right to go, okay, now I'm going to go see this in a broader way across the whole organization. And you have salespeople saying, oh, you're going to want this because I closed X deal because of the champion kit that Samantha built, right? And that takes work, and that takes patience, and that takes time. But when you can achieve that, it's really quite remarkable. But marketers have to understand our buyers. We have to earn the right. If the salespeople are the only people talking to buyers, we haven't earned the right to ask to step into those conversations. We've got to get out there and build relationships.
So funny. There's like circles within circles. It's very meta, these conversations, because when you think about, like, certainly as a communications person now, and, I still cross over marketing in a lot of ways, but, I need to communicate into my salespeople, in order for them to communicate out to the customers, but I need to understand what the buyers are. So I have to kind of keep circling back, but I don't know if my assumption about the buyers is right until I talk to the salespeople. It's this kind of cycle that keeps going on and on. I just thought about things like, and not just in my current company, but throughout my corporate experience, you see things like, okay, the research department, the insights people have come up with this stuff. This is what the market looks like right now. And the salespeople are like, really? Yeah. That's accurate or not? They have their own, and they'll choose to walk away. But what you just said about piloting something and about experimenting, I don't want to, I don't think I can stress enough how important that is to be able to do that. You need to have an organization that recognizes that that is an important part of what we do and encourages it. But you also have to be able to keep control of it so that it's not really eating the time of people that too much. And like one thing that we did, or that I've done on several occasions, but certainly recently, is we looked into specific target audience for a campaign on how to design a very hygienic workspace and environment, right? So we were looking specifically at architects and designers for this. And we did a lot of research. Now, we talked to salespeople. They were very happy to share lists and give us what we wanted. And they were very, very collaborative and cooperative. And that was fantastic. So there's no complaints there. But when we started to run our own campaign, and it was an experiment and a small pilot, because we're a communications team, we're not supposed to run marketing campaigns, don't you know? But we started to run a campaign. And I learned a lot about how much content marketing has changed over the last 2-3 years, by the way, in this one little campaign. That said, what we created for this campaign, the assets, we knew that we couldn't just like hand them to the salespeople and say, go do this. So we created a toolkit, and just put it out there and said, listen, this is out of the kindness of our hearts. We've created something for you. Feel free, go ahead and play with it. Tell us what's wrong with it. And when we ask them to tell us what's wrong with something, then they use it. It's kind of funny.
To tell you. Here's the thing about salespeople, that we understand. Yes, they're eager to tell you what's wrong with something, but they're also eager to find things that make their job more effective. They really do. And I know we sometimes forget that because we sort of get lost in the, I'm hungry, I want more leads. Give me another data sheet, whatever, I want to go to this event over here, this obscure city that I happen to have in my territory, like all those things are real, but they want the same things we do, which is to grow the business. So if we can find ways to find those influential salespeople and make them shine and have them advocate, give feedback, be a part of that process. Whenever I'm building a new sales toolkit, I always have salespeople participate in the brainstorm. It's not because they're bringing me an idea that we didn't think of, but because I want them to feel ownership like I do over whatever comes out the other side.
I want to know how they talk. Like I want to know how they speak to the client so I can write that way. Right. I mean, I don't want to write something that they're not going to use or ever use naturally in their own language. That's like one main thing. But, where I originally where my thinking was before I got kind of spun out a little bit was that we as marketers and as communicators or as kind of like in-house, like service organizations within the organization, we have to have buyer personas, buyer profiles of our salespeople, like of our internal stakeholders. So our internal audience, our internal stakeholders, we should treat them with the same level of kind of, detail of what their motivations are, what they're looking for, what drives them, what's their why. When we create things for them. Absolutely. And when we serve them.
How they learn, right? We need to create things for different kinds of learning styles. And, we think, I am guilty of this. You think of a salesperson as a very particular type of personality, but it's not true. Some of the most successful salespeople I've met are very non-typical in terms of what you think of from a personality standpoint. And they're just really, really good at their job because they've tapped into whatever their strength is. And one of the best outbound calling people I ever had when I worked for SAP, we hired an outsourced agent. She was like literally grandma. And she was selling this tech, but she had this, people didn't hang up on grandma, and she was smart and she understood what we did and she had mastered it. But like, if you were to put her in a room at a sales conference, no one would have picked her out as the star performer. In a million years, nobody would have picked her out. But she was phenomenal. And she appealed to a set of buyers that some of the more aggressive, more typical salespeople didn't appeal to. So we just have to remember that. I think you're absolutely right. We have to understand our internal audiences as well as we understand our external audiences.
It's critically important. Do like almost the same level of research on them that we would for our external audience. It's hard to find an organization that actually understands that and that encourages that level, because they talk about the way to succeed, Dan, as a as a back office or middle office kind of person is to build relationships. Build relationships. You're a relationship builder. I mean, I'm a relationship builder is what I do, but I always think, okay, I've been successful in this particular role because I built good relationships. But that's not what it is. It's not building relationships. The relationships are secondary. It's knowing them. Yes. It's knowing what they need and what they want. So it's selling, essentially.
Absolutely. I think that's
you're always in it.
It's really essential, right? And it centers by everybody orienting around the buyer. If we're all oriented around the buyer and we all understand that buyer well, and we've done our jobs well there, it's easier to collaborate. It's easier to understand the motivations, right? And we need to understand the salesperson's comp plans. That's going to create certain behaviors. So we need to understand what they're incented to do financially, right?
Yeah.
And how we can support that. Because look, if you're in sales, you care about your financial compensation, or you'd be doing a different job, right?
Oh, 100%. And we marketers and anybody in our field, I think we have to continuously understand this. But at the same time, we want to collaborate and cooperate and be their partners. And we can only do that if we recognize those facts. Something you said a little while ago, you said something about learning, and that made me remember that I wanted to ask you something else about learning, because what we're talking about here, it's you and me. We're in this industry for a while, and
I appreciate you
different perspectives.
Announcing my age,
Well, it's a while,
I'm fully transparent. It's
but look, I mean, we've been around, we can have these conversations, but a lot of folks are out there and they just don't know how to start. They don't know where to go, and obviously, buying your book is one great way to do that, by the way. Unleash Possible, available on Amazon. But you've just started something new. I mean, there's been a lot, I think, during the last couple of years of improvement in learning technology and in the capability to reach people who, we wouldn't normally be able to reach, but who need what we have and what we want to have. And you said earlier that not everybody can afford your services, but you know what? Some people can teach themselves. And you just did a big thing.
Yeah, thank you. I did
launch a new product.
Yeah, I did. And I will say, particularly for the people who are either newer to the career altogether or new in the role, like a lot of people work in one part of marketing and then transition. With more people being home, the learning curve is different than when I was in an office all the time, which I would not want to do today. Like, I would not want to live that life again. But I had the advantage of overhearing a lot of meetings and a lot of conversations and learning through osmosis. That doesn't happen when I'm not physically in an office with people anymore, or all the time with people anymore. And so I'm really excited because just in January, I launched my first on-demand course. And what I did was, I've been teaching workshops and training, both custom and at conferences and like bigger group things, for many years. And during the pandemic, I figured out how to teach those virtually instead of in person. And that was a big transition, a healthy one, but a big one. And then I knew that a lot of people can't afford my custom training. It's an expensive proposition. It's a highly configurable offering, but that the book was helpful to them. But some people don't learn by reading. Some people learn visually and through auditory means. And so I wanted to take sort of the best of some of my workshop material and turn it into a self-paced class. Now, that sounded like a great mission. I underestimated the amount of work for that, because without being able to guide it and do the exercise, I really had to transform how I did that. So I'm really excited about the course. The first one that's launched is all about finding buyer insights. It's heavy on qualitative research skills and how to use those things. And it's video-based training, but it's also has a lot of exercises in a workbook, because the whole point is, I don't want you just to listen to what I'm saying. I want you to see how that applies to your job and apply those skills to your work. So it's been great to launch that and start doing it. And because I'm a research nerd, as we've talked about, I actually tested it with 80 beta testers before I brought it to market. So I had the opportunity. I was really fortunate. Some of those people came from one of our Uprising colleagues, who teaches digital marketing at the University of Tennessee. So I had people who were really, really early in their marketing careers. I had very seasoned people look at it, and I got feedback and incorporated. And they really informed the final product. That testing and feedback and asking questions, they informed that how it ended up and what I ended up doing. So it's been a really great. I'm really proud of it. I'm really excited. I can't wait for people to more people to use it and give me more feedback, and it'll inform the next class that comes out.
And so it's about mastering the art of understanding buyer insights.
Yes.
And you used buyer insights to then create that to make better buyer insights, which are going to help other people get better at understanding buyer insights. See this whole cyclical thing that we go through.
Yeah, you just spend
feeds on itself,
right? On things. But yeah, it really is all about that. And look, there are people whose job it is in your company, whether you call them research people or product marketing or solutions marketing, to sort of do this. But we all need to be better at it, right? You're in communications and have a background in PR. You need to understand that better. Salespeople need to understand that better. Demand gen needs to content, right? All these things are coming together, and I think all of us should be good at doing this. And so my hope is that this course helps a lot more people be good at doing this, even if it's not their primary job, because A, it helps them do their job, but B, it helps them ask questions of the people whose job it is, right? They can better pull out and get what they need to do their job really well.
How deep do you go into understanding the buyer? Like, do you go into the neuroscience of it? Do you go into the just some of the profiling tactics that we have?
I wouldn't say go into the neuroscience of it, because I'm not a neuroscientist, and I would be, but there's a whole interview guide that we talk about how to ask questions, what questions to ask. There's tons and tons of prompts in that you can customize. I do talk about tips of how to conduct an interview. What are things that people often do wrong? What are things that you really need to focus on and do well? How to create an interview guide that's going to be effective. So there's a lot of tools in there. I've done thousands of interviews. I wasn't great at it at first, right? You get better and better as you practice. But what I'm hope that I do is I've taken the mystery away from it. Because if I could take enough of the mystery away and you just go do it for a few times, you're going to get good at it. Or you're going to find that I really suck at this and I need to go get some more help, right? And that's okay too. Yep. But I want to take the mystery out of this, because people are afraid to do this. Even if all it is, hey, you go to an event, you go to a seminar, and you sit down at a lunch table, it's not necessarily going to be a focused research interview call. But if you've got that in the back of their mind, you can guide a really interesting conversation that you pull data out of that you can reuse in other ways.
Yeah. And by the way, understanding buyers and kind of doing those kinds of interviews helps you outside of that field as well. I mean, in any conversation, really, sometimes there have been a couple of podcast episodes I've done where I feel like I'm doing a buyer research episode. It does happen sometimes, or a stakeholder research episode.
I think just
whatever.
Understanding people is a good human skill, right? It helps us. It helps us in our jobs, but it helps us in our personal lives. I have 4 adult children, and sometimes I'm mind boggled that they were biologically related and were raised in the same household, because they're so different. And they have some similarities. They all push their sleeves up in a certain way, like their dad, or have some things that are similar, but they're really, really, really different. And so being good at doing this has helped me certainly try and adapt and understand my own kids and my own family relationships and navigate that, which, we all know is rewarding and also terrifyingly challenging at the same time.
Oh yeah. Marketing, it just goes to show you that marketing is everything, isn't it? I mean, our profession is very applicable.
If I were to go back in time and say, what was the schooling that I would do now, knowing where I ended up, somewhere along the line, I probably would have gotten a degree in psychology. I didn't end up going back and doing that. But that is, psychology and understanding how people think and are motivated is sort of fundamental to the buyer research we're talking about.
Oh yeah. I'm super interested in neuroscience. And I don't, not to denigrate any of the kind of big public speakers out there who talk about being neuroscientists, the Tony Robbins of the world. That's not what I mean. I mean more of the kind of more clinical or research oriented things that are coming out these days. And
I took a great workshop, and I'm embarrassed because I can't think of the name of the person who hosted it, but it was the psychology of website design. And he was, had a real, scientific degree, and then had done one. And it was really fascinating. I don't do website design every day, but I found it really fascinating and really helpful to me, even more broadly in thinking about communication. And so it was like a 3 or 4 day class a few years ago, but it was awesome, right? We should all be challenging ourselves to learn new things all the time.
Yeah. Like there's a book I read, like back in the day, there's a book I read that, or at least read part of it, that stuck with me for a long time. Steve Krug or Krug, I forget how you say his last name. And it was a UX, like user experience book, one of the earlier ones that was like basically saying, what was it called? Don't Make Me Think. That's what it's called.
Ooh, I haven't read that one. I might have to put on my list.
It's a classic. And I'll bet you anything, it's very relevant even today, although probably he's talking about web design techniques that are way, way, way gone, like long, long, long ago. But that does just kind of bring back even something we said earlier about the simplicity and the number of features that we want to put into, or that our product developers want to put into things that our buyers don't really care about. Like keep it simple, keep everything very basic, so that nobody has to think. And you even said today, or I think it was today, in an interview or in a video that you did about eliminating friction from the process. That's what it's all about, right? What we do as marketers, as communicators, we're trying to persuade. We're trying to persuade some audience, some stakeholders somewhere to do something. Like that's the basics. But really, you can't do that if there's friction. Friction being the obstacles, right? So our primary job is to understand who we're talking about. And that's, I think, why it's fantastic that your first course that you're offering is about understanding buyers and the science behind that, because it is a science. And then we got to figure out, okay, if we know what they're thinking, then we can remove the obstacles that are in front of them. And if we're smart about it, we can create a frictionless process, or as frictionless as possible. Remove 4 or 5 landing pages from the whole, content, the lead generation process or something, whatever it is.
I'll give you this little example. This happened to me. I won't name the company because I'm not, the point isn't to shame them, but I've used a popular e-signature product for most of my time that I've owned my own company for my contracts. I don't do a ton of contracts, right? That's not, I don't have a big agency. It's not by design. That's not what I want to do, but it's been perfectly fine. And they've raised their price periodically. It's started to get a little expensive for how I use it, but I didn't think anything of that at the time. I'm coming up to my renewal, and they sent me an email. They did something really smart. They said, "Hey, we are raising our prices, significantly, but we've looked at how you use our product, and we think the starter pack is actually a great fit for you." I'm like, "Awesome! I'm sure it is, because I use like 2 features of this whole robust thing." And so I replied back to the email. I said, "This is great. What's the cost?" And I won't tell the whole story, but over and over again, would not give me the product, will not give me the price unless I have a meeting with somebody. And I'm like, I'm not wasting my time meeting with someone. I just need this price. We went back and forth to the point that I actually turned off my auto renew, and there's plenty of other ways to serve what I do. They truly lost a multi-year client. And what makes me more sad is they were headed in the right direction. They recognized my usage. They figured out what a better offer was. And I know what happened is the person who contacted me gets paid only one way, and that is to get meetings. I'm sure this is what happened. And I don't want a meeting. So, because it's a waste of everybody's time to do a meeting. Just tell me the price and I'm going to sign off right now. Like I know I am. Oh, and if I need a meeting, then I'll ask for it. But they incented their team for the wrong behavior. And as a result of that, they've lost a customer. Even after I talked on the phone and told him I thought he would escalate it, and it's nowhere. So, we don't want to do that. We want to take complete friction. E-signatures is pretty much a commodity offering. There's lots of things. I was happy to stay with this company, but now I'm just going to go to things because they put too much friction in the sales process. Yeah. And that's the risk we take when we don't constantly go through and try to eliminate those friction points as they come up.
Yeah, they literally rubbed you the wrong way with all that friction. Like it's like very,
yes.
That's and it's just something that people don't get. They pay too much attention to funnels. That you got caught in a funnel, right? You got caught in one of those. Somebody somewhere has designed that funnel so that you go to point A. Now, nope, you're going here. This is where you're going. We know that 75% of people will convert if they go here. What if you're in that 25% you want to convert, but you're not going that direction? I'm willing to skip the whole process, is what you said.
Yep.
But they put too many obstacles in front of you. Hey, I don't blame you for shifting, for changing to a new provider. I just can't believe how much time has passed. I see that we're basically here towards the end of our journey today together, Samantha. I wanted to ask you just one final thing before we wrap up, which is, I guess it's kind of a nested question, but is there anything else you want to talk about, and like what's been on your mind lately? Is there something that that's keeping you up at night? That whole kind of milieu of a question.
Well, it is a
free reign.
Excellent question, and there's lots of things on my mind. Not the least of which is an upcoming trip to the Galapagos Islands that I'm taking with my 20-year-old. But I'm actually going to mention it because not because of the trip, but for this really important thing. I'm going to be gone for just like 8 or 9 days on this trip with my 20-year-old. But the first week of February, so that's at the end of February. The first week in February, I'm going to be traveling for a client engaging, helping them with an event, and I'm gone the whole week. So that left me a little less than 2 weeks of real focused work time to do all the other things. And I made the decision to tell one of my clients that I'm not going to be doing work for them in February at all. Now, financially, maybe not the best decision for me to make. But it was really important for me to create the level of service that my clients expect from me and that I want to be able to deliver. And they were in a position where it was okay for me to put it on hold for a month. It wasn't going to cause them any pain.
Right.
But we don't always make business decisions that way, right? We look at the short term instead of the long term. In the long term, I know me not going crazy in that month and doing sort of partway things and trying to take on all this stuff is going to let me keep the level of expectations in the service in a good place, because it's all about referrals and activity. That's how my whole business is built. And even if you don't have the luxury of running your own business like I do, we have to make those decisions in our business. And the way we make those decisions is by understanding our customers, where they are in their process, how they're using our products and service, what they need from us from any given period of time, and how do we deliver our best selves. And if we do that, and we do that well, we're not just going to build a business that lasts today. We're going to build a sustainable, durable business that can have predictable growth. And that is as much about knowing what to say no to as what to say yes to. And deep buyer insights, you cannot do that properly if you don't understand that community at a very, very detailed level. And I hope that your listeners, if they take nothing else from our conversation, they take away that little knowledge that's going to go out and motivate them to want to learn more, because there's always more things to do. Always more things to build, always more emails to send, always more phone calls to make. Knowing what not to do is as important as knowing what to do.
As a ADHD sufferer or beneficiary, I don't know what you want to call it. I often don't know what not to do is kind of one of my things. And, I do dabble around quite a bit, and I find myself every once in a while going with my hair on fire for all the wrong reasons. So I will take that advice to heart as well. Samantha, I appreciate that. Everybody out there, we just touched the surface today with Samantha Stone. I mean, you got to read the book, Unleash Possible. So do I, actually, the rest of it. But we have to read Unleash Possible, a marketing playbook that drives sales, because it does. Check out unleashpossible.com, which is Samantha's website. And you'll find out all about her services and her company there. You can link to her podcast, the Unleash Possible podcast. There is a brand here. The Unleash Possible brand is Samantha Stone.
Wildly consistent these days.
Wildly consistent, which is very important. Evelyn will be proud. Twitter, Samantha Stone. And LinkedIn, look for Samantha Stone Marketing. It's just an honor to have you here, Samantha. Did I miss anything? Is there someplace else people can find you?
No, the simplest thing is just remember, go to unleashpossible.com. Everything links from there. You get the book from there, the courses from there. You can just schedule a hello with me from there. You can tell me what you're up to. Tons and tons of resources that are free. check it out. And then, of course, all the other places I love to say hello. And I really am a person who loves to hear from people. I crave that human interaction. So I really hope your listeners won't be shy.
Yeah, please do reach out to Samantha anytime. And, hey, join us on the Rise community. If you're interested in that, reach out to me and to Samantha as well.
Fair warning, you might be addicted to it. So
it's very addictive.
Worth it. It's a good addiction. We have bad addictions, gummy bears that sit on my desk, and good addictions. The Rise is a good addiction.
Rise is a good addiction. That's a great way to leave this. Samantha, what a great time I've had with you. Thanks so much for coming on. I hope to have you again someday.
Me too.
All right. Thanks for listening to the Dan Nestle Show. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. People always ask me, why do I do the show? I do it for the ratings. I do it for your validation. So do me a favor. Go over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or someplace else, wherever you're listening to podcasts, and subscribe. Leave a review, rate me, and share with your friends. Anything you can do to spread the word, I deeply appreciate it. Thanks again for listening to the Dan Nestle Show.